morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sons of Sequoia podcast, broadcasting live from Wheat Ridge, Colorado, the home of the champions. Today is Friday, August 6th, and we're going to be discussing a report published by the Pew Research Center at the beginning of 2020 about news on YouTube. How are you this morning? You are muted.
I always do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day in Colorado, and I'm looking forward to this. This is our third installment this week, and we did look at different types of YouTube, either videos or YouTube reporting. And today we're looking at a YouTube research report and data on who uses YouTube. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. Now, I will say before we get into this discussion that on Monday we covered CoffeeZilla. That was a very bad episode. I was not feeling well. But then, if you want to go back in the archives, that's not one to look up. But then we covered Andrew Callahan and Channel 5 on Wednesday. I think that was a much better episode. And according to the Pew Research Center's criteria, their methodology, I don't think that Andrew Callahan, Channel 5, which is probably my favorite independent journalist on YouTube, would qualify as one of their journalists. Because he does videos where he goes to Marin County and looks at these two twins, or he goes to a pickup artist convention, and I don't think the Pew Research Center would classify that as news. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And even after we read it and talked about it before the broadcast, we keep talking about it. And this is what we talked about on Wednesday and Andrew Callahan was extremely interesting, and we kept talking about that. And I think what we'll discuss today, and what I plan on talking about, I can't wait for, it's going to be exciting, to me it is anyway, is news, journalism, reporting. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. And however many different ways can it be done? And what type of news have we been listening to?
Yes. So if we jump into the report, I think that I'm a little bit off from you because I said we were going to focus on number 2, but yeah. I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to go to the beginning of this.
Number 1? You're going to go to number 1?
Going to go to number 1.
I was looking at number 1. I was looking at that. Let's start with that.
Okay.
The methodology.
I wasn't looking at methodology. This is I mean, do you see where I'm at?
No.
I haven't shared my screen with you. There we go. So this is where the meat of the report gets. This is after the methodology. But I guess the methodology is not a bad thing to look at as well, right?
Well, you start there to see that's the data. That's the data and the biases and the data you're looking at, the biases that you have, and there's many of them. There's many biases.
The funny thing is, we could make a whole episode criticizing the specific methodology of this research, and I don't want to criticize Pew Research too much. We have 5 authors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Galen Stocking, Patrick Van Kessel, Michael Barthel, Katerina Eva Matza, and Maya Kuzam. They did a thorough job with this, and they used a lot of methods at their disposal. Now, one of my gripes with this is the robust nature of data acquisition that occurs when you study something online. Very little of that was used. So if you look, they surveyed 12,638 adults, and they were all members of Pew Research American Trends Panel, an online survey panel recruited through national random sampling of residential addresses. Now, they did a lot of qualitative questioning of the participants. Like, would you say you watch YouTube a little, an average amount, or often? And they would self-report their YouTube usage. And I see that as problematic because when people self-report, they lie or they're mistaken. I think that with digital means at their disposal. And now people wouldn't allow this, but they'd say, oh, let me install an app on my phone and my computer, and you can see my screen time on YouTube, and you can see the videos that I've watched. That would give you so much more robust data. So it says, you said often, but you watched it over the course of this month 11 hours. This guy that says that he doesn't watch it very much watched it 45 hours. You know, if you could get to that level of granularity, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. If you ask a teenager, do they really use their phone that much? And they'll say, no, not that much. You ask a grandparent, do you use your phone that much? You say, no, not that much. And the different amount of hours on the phone is significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to answer the same answer. So it really depends on the basis of measurement. And actually, I want to get back to what you said. I don't want to criticize the Pew Research statistics at all, because I think it's easy to. It's extremely difficult, actually, because in my area, this is my area. I'll just say it is impossible to get a purely random sample to pull out statistical inferences without any biases. It's impossible. And so that's not the issue. I think the issue is understanding the biases and interpreting what you have in light of those biases. And just like what you're saying is like, what's your basis of measurement? There's going to be some error in there. There's going to be some variability due to that. And I think it's not how much error there is, it's that recognizing the error and then the interpretation has to be relative to what you're looking at. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. I think they did a real good job of that. But the viewer that reads it and the way it's used, that's always been a problem. And yes, the Pew Research scientists, they know what they're doing, and they're saying it correctly. But someone who doesn't understand it that well, like in politics or business or the social news outlet, they'll take those statements and they'll spin them in a way that they were not meant to they're not meant that way at all.
Yes, and I see that the Pew Research, they've done a couple of things. Like, independent reporters are more likely to report on conspiracy theories. That sort of seems to have a slant. Now, but they're not sort of saying they're reporting on them, they're boosting the signal, they're amplifying them, they're supporting them. They're just saying they are reporting on them. And I think when we get into what they found in their findings, a lot of people looking at this say, yeah, so, like, or reality is often disappointing, I guess is what I'm saying. If you do the work, and I'm going to put up the content analysis as well. Okay. They looked at 17,000 channels, and they used a script to visit 145 channels. They narrowed it down to 377 channels, each with at least 100,000 subscribers. And then they watched the videos of those 377 channels, and a team of trained human coders watched the first 10 minutes, or the full video of shorter than 10 minutes, of 3,000 total videos published in December 2019. They analyzed the topic, the primary person or group focused on, and the tone, positive, negative, clear, and more. So that's the, in a nutshell, methodology. I will say, and I told you this last night, why would you use subscribers? I mean, it's just one easy way to sort of differentiate groups, but you can watch without subscribing, and you could subscribe without watching. And why wouldn't you use mean views? That might be a better indication of how popular the channel is now. If some guy was just killing it with views during the Obama era, and during the Trump era, he's fallen off, and he's getting 5,000 views a video, but he used to get 100,000 views a video, but he has 100,000 subscribers, he's in that milieu that you've chosen. And so it doesn't really award, or subscribers doesn't really award recency of your content. So it's an interesting choice.
Well, getting back to what I said before, is that recognizing that then you have to interpret the results relative to these are subscribers. And so what type of population are you really identifying?
But no,
It,
the subscribers were used to choose the channels.
that's
The
right.
but the data from the participants was a random sampling from their American Trends panel. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Um, so there's the participants that are the watchers are different than how the methodology they used to choose which channels they chose, which was they did it based on 100,000 subscribers. Also, last night I said to you, there's a huge difference between a conspiracy theory channel with some nut job and he has 100,000 subscribers and CNN or Fox News that has 5 million. And what they did was they took 100,000 subscribers was the baseline. So if you had 101,000 subscribers and you were pumping out content, you were treated as an undifferentiated mass from larger creators with much larger followings, an order of magnitude larger.
Yep. Yep. Well, you're getting into survey design and population identification, and it's always been a problem in statistical sampling,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll never go away. It's a problem in the past, present, future. But again, let's just recognize that
Mm-hmm.
and try to interpret this in light of what real content and also the trained coders that are looking at this. There's going to be variability there. There's going to be bias and variability there. There's going to be bias and variability in the content that they're looking at. I mean, it's a lot of sources.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, it's not that we just ignore this data. It's you have to be careful how you interpret the data.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'll get back to that.
And I will say, and this is my own personal failing. I'm looking at a lot of the results that are pulled out of this, and there's no real big headline result, I don't think. It's all according to Hoyle. But then I'm also looking at things that I wish they would have done. And I think instead of thinking about what I wish they would have done, I should just appreciate what they have done, right?
Oh, David, I think you should do both.
Okay. Well, should we get into some of the results and sort of start discussing them?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. A quarter of U.S. adults get news from YouTube. I think that seems low to me, but I get my news from YouTube, so there's a bias there for me. So this is
Are you
I'm
on
on
number
number
two?
I'm on number 1, I believe. Do you want me to
Okay.
put I'll put the link in chat so that you can have it. This is exactly where I am.
Okay.
And then
Thanks.
if you could close your no, I'm good. Never mind.
Thank you.
So here we are, and the first graph, it's a pie chart. Now, what would you call this chart? The most important way, an important way, but not the most important way.
Oh, that's just a percentage bar chart with the different identifying the different percentages.
Okay.
I mean, when you have a multiple categories, it'd be just a percentage bar chart.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a quarter of adults get their news from YouTube. How do you feel about that number? Does that surprise you at all?
Yes, I would expect that to be much more.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think everyone, well, I know I look at YouTube quite a bit. Well, it says news, you know.
Mm-hmm.
There again, do you get my news from YouTube? Not really. I get it from social media, from different news channels, but not necessarily YouTube.
See,
I will go back and look at YouTube, but then that's just me.
I get my news a lot of my news from YouTube. I would say YouTube, Colorado Public Radio. Shout out to Colorado Public Radio. And then
Yeah.
long form news would be, foreign affairs more. But I may watch CNN, but it'll be on YouTube. I may watch Fox News or MSNBC, but those will be on YouTube. I may watch independent news creators, but they're on YouTube. I sort of see YouTube as a source for news. And perhaps the most important source, other than Colorado Public Radio, that I use, because I listen to Colorado Public Radio in my car. So those are my two main sources for news. And I would say for me, I'd be in the 13% of the 26% that YouTube is probably the most important way that I get the news. And
Yeah,
then,
and also I wonder if first of all, what do they mean by news? Uh, Second, can you distribute this demographically over ages? And another way is saying, uh, how do they define news? Let's go back to how do you define news? What do you
mhm.
listen to? And I think when you have opinions, people call that news.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call that news.
I think they are calling that news in this.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't call that news. That's just someone's opinion.
Now, there's also like YouTube channels that I've seen that they report on other YouTube channels. There's a channel called Drama Alert with Keemstar. He says, let's get right into the news. We have so much news today. This YouTuber did this TikToker did that. So it's sort of like entertainment news, but on YouTube. Is that news?
I wouldn't call that news. There again, people will define news differently. That's not news.
It's
That's what that
gossip.
guy. That's gossip. That's what the
Hmm.
guy. Someone else said. Someone else said. No, go to the source. I think Andrew Callahan is news.
But some people would say I wouldn't call that news.
They wouldn't call it news.
News is when you have three people that have no idea what they're talking about sitting around in suits in a studio arguing with each other.
Ah, that's news. That's right. That's what people call news. Thank you, David. And Andrew Callahan, he goes to the people.
Mm-hmm.
If it's he went to a QAnon conference,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "What do you believe?" And he lets them tell him what they believe. Anyway, I learned so much from what's going on, from the horse's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that's news. But like you said, a bunch of suits arguing back and forth about,
Something they don't know anything about.
yeah,
Um, so continuing, we'll never get through this whole study, but
no,
YouTube
but we're,
channels are a mix of independent and news organizations. And then
yeah,
other organizations, I see that sort of more like trade publications. Like if you're, I don't know, a news adjacent, or like the Pew Research Center. They're not a news organization, but they have a YouTube channel and they publish videos, if that makes sense. Um,
Now, would the other organizations be like technical journal articles that publish, or journal articles that are vetted, that are researched, that are peer reviewed?
I would doubt that any journal that's a technical journal that's vetted, researched, and peer reviewed has over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Oh, good point.
So I would say probably not.
But if they
Um,
did, we'd go there.
it could, yeah. Now this was a big takeaway. Where is the top here? Oh, people that often get their news. The news outlets and independent channels are the same. Now that's a self-report, though, right? Do you get
Hmm.
your news sometimes from YouTube, or do you get your news often from YouTube? There's no real qualitative measure of that. You're just asking the people that you poll to sort of put a judgment on something that could be quantitative. If you were able to see their viewing activity, you could say people that watch more than 10 hours of news a week are more likely to favor independent channels. But instead they say, do you watch it sometimes, hardly, or often? And you get less information that way. Just under half YouTube news channels are oriented around a specific personality. This is my question, and it's not answered. I actually read through the report. So this is like if you're a YouTuber like Philip DeFranco. I think I've showed you some of his videos. He's the guy that reads the news really fast, and he said, I couldn't understand what he's saying. I think that format works on YouTube because people are trying to absorb as much information as possible, as fast as possible. So 15% are a public figure that was big before they came to YouTube, and they took their following to YouTube. 29% is organically on YouTube, and then they say 56% is not personality driven. This is my question. Um, Fox News. I'm sure that Fox News, Hannity and Tucker Carlson are the majority of the viewed clips. But they would say Fox News has 20 anchors, so they're not personality driven. Whereas in some respect, they definitely are. And the clips that put up the numbers would be personality driven. People want to see what Tucker has to say. Same thing with MSNBC. It would be Maddow, perhaps more than some of the other people on MSNBC. And so you could say they're not personality driven because they have a network and a whole host of personalities. But I think that the anchor person does sort of become a personality on YouTube.
Yep, it's a very good point, and I agree with you.
So I find that problematic. But I guess what they're saying is the channel based around a single personality? That's their criterion.
Yeah, they're looking at channel popularity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think about tech YouTubers that sort of do the tech news and the latest gadgets, and I think of Linus Tech Tips versus MKBHD. Those are two of the largest tech channels. MKBHD is Marquez Brownlee, and he's the host of every single video on that channel. Now, Linus Tech Tips, that's Linus Sebastian, but he probably hosts 20% of the videos on the channel, and the other 80% are hosted by other people on his staff. So is that a personality-driven YouTube channel still? I mean, I feel like it is because you get to know the people on his staff, and you say, oh, so-and-so is hosting this video. Oh, so-and-so is hosting this video. But I think according to their methodology, it wouldn't be. Right? Because there's multiple personalities.
Probably, that's true. But on the other hand, they're just looking at what they're looking at is just trying to categorize from the viewers and the coders. Is there a public figure or is there a YouTuber that's got popular with it? And so I think that when you're looking at YouTube news, what they're doing is like the origination of it, not necessarily the delivery of it. Like how did they come about? How did they get? This is more valuable on, to me, it's more valuable on how did these channels get created than how do they survive? Because they've grown up to this that way. This is where they came from, and it's not really talking that much about how they deliver the news.
No, I mean, but it gets into it a little bit. Now, this is what their viewers from their random sample see as the problems on YouTube. And limiting ad revenue for video creators, that seems like a large problem for people. That surprised me. I felt like the average viewer wouldn't really care if a YouTuber gets demonetized. So I'm surprised that that's on people's radar. Now, misinformation is second listed. This is sort of like a China versus U.S. Thing in the Olympics, where China lists total gold medals and U.S. lists total medals. And China says, we have more, and U.S. says, we have more. Is misinformation more or less of a problem? It seems like this should be first, right? Because more people see misinformation as a problem. Doesn't this sort of look like a Pareto chart? But they've chosen limiting ad revenues probably because it's 30.5% as opposed to like 30.1% or something. Do you see what I'm saying? They chose the very big problem as the stacking point. So misinformation. I'm surprised that
to me the top two are the same.
Okay.
And even the top four are very, very close to one another.
I think misinformation, the fascinating thing is so many people see it as a problem.
Yeah, but when you look at censorship by YouTube, 29 versus 30%, statistically, that's no difference between those two. And 26 to 33, 28 to 27, that's really, really minor differences. They're essentially the same.
Anyway. I think anyone that's upset with political bias on YouTube, and I was thinking about this when I was looking through this data, is a complete idiot. because you can find someone that will tell you exactly what you want to hear on YouTube. And you might be able to recognize that as bias, but you can find someone arguing the exact opposite. So the site exists as a platform, and it really does, allow just about everyone, except for maybe the former president after he tried to overthrow the government, but they allow just about everyone to have a channel. And you can get opinions from a broad spectrum of people. So to say that the site itself is biased, I think maybe the issue is with you don't know how to use the site, because you can get the site to tell you whatever you want to hear. So you're doing it wrong.
And that's probably why these percentages are so close to one another.
It's the lack of facility of the users, not.
It's the users will, in YouTube, the users will be fed what they are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how social media works. And so whatever they watch, if I watch something on some subject matter, the next time I come, I'll have a bunch of more very, very similar YouTubes.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep watching it. And that's why I say there's if I start looking around, I can see that there's a problem, but that's true with every single one of these topics. And so the level of me looking around to see if there's a big problem or a moderate problem or a small problem is going to be pretty much the same no matter what the issue is, because it's not a measure of the population. Maybe it's just a measure of how YouTube does it.
Mm-hmm.
How YouTube feeds that information and those channels to you.
And now I think they're going to get into this, but censorship will be what a conservative sees as a problem, and misinformation will be what a liberal sees as a problem. And are they saying that it's a problem because they've heard someone else say it's a problem, or have they observed it as a problem themselves? That's another question, right? Do you go on YouTube and you see misinformation? Or do you listen to a news report on YouTube that tells you that there is misinformation and it's causing people to act out in strange ways? Do you go on YouTube and see censorship? Or do you go on YouTube and have someone tell you that with YouTube, censorship is the problem? Well, it's like, well, that person's allowed on YouTube. They're not censoring him. So is it really a problem?
Good point.
Okay. Independent YouTube channels covered QAnon conspiracy theories much more frequently than news organizations. Well, I think the jewel in the crown of QAnon coverage we covered on Wednesday, which was Andrew Callahan with Channel 5 and his video about the Q conference. Now, what do you think they're trying to suggest with this? Because I had my own thoughts. I thought that Pew Research was trying to say, since independent channels are more likely to report on QAnon, independent channels are worse than traditional media outlets. That's what I thought they were getting at, but that might just be my own personal bias. How do you analyze this specific stat and chart?
Well, a number of ways. The implication, first of all, is that the independent YouTube channels are more vocal on QAnon, and they'll say QAnon, they'll use a name.
Mm-hmm.
Second, they'll use QAnon because it's a talking point, and independent channels can talk about that. They can talk about it in much more depth than other channels. And the other thing that I thought about is that QAnon conspiracy theories, hey, that's an issue. That's an issue that sometimes the channels exist just because of conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked about this before. I really think that there's not that much difference between independent channels and the other channels. It's just how they say it.
Yeah.
I think it's addressed the same amount, but it's addressed differently. And independent channels will say it. It's a QAnon, and the other channels will not really name it, be as direct in naming it, but they'll still talk about it specifically.
And of course, this is December 2019, so I feel like there was more open discussion after January 6th of this year, 2021, of QAnon because, they managed to breach the Capitol. So all of a sudden they became front and center. And then it was like they're a conspiracy theory, but they're actually out there wreaking havoc in the real world. And the traditional media started covering them. Now, back in 2019, you could view this as because independent channels are more likely to cover conspiracy theories, independent channels are bad. Or you could view it the opposite way. And Pew Research Center is not telling you how to view this. You could say 1 year and 6 days later, after this study concluded, the conspiracy theorists that the independent channels were warning us about stormed the Capitol. And so who was providing better news? These independents warning you about QAnon, or the news organization channels that said they're not even worthy of discussion? Maybe they were worthy of discussion, and if the news organizations were pounding home that these guys are a problem a year earlier, we might not have had people running through the halls of the Capitol of the United States. So you could look at it both ways, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And all of Pew, like you say, David, all Pew Research is doing is saying, these are the numbers that we found. Mm-hmm. And they have to be careful about all they say here is independent YouTube channel covered QAnon conspiracy theories more frequently. They didn't say why. Mm-hmm. They didn't say the content. And that frequently is just the percentages is all it is.
And they didn't say they advocated the conspiracy theory. They may have just described or explained or condemned the conspiracy theory.
Or even named it by name.
Named
like
it, and then, like if you named it and you condemned it, that's the same as if you named it and you promoted it, according to this chart,
Or just use the name. Wow, there's QAnon. Mm-hmm. Boom, they've named it. Or they can say there are paramilitary groups that you really didn't use the word QAnon, but you really described it. Mm-hmm. And the other, which now's a good time, I want to also mention, I was thinking about this, is that really all this is doing is talking about percentages and reporting what they saw. Mm-hmm. There's no interpretation really, because when they say these things like independent YouTube channels covered more frequently than news organizations, it's how they defined it, and they're just reporting what exists. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a business intelligence approach. It's not really an analytics approach where you go in and analyze things and predict things and say this is what's happening within our country, within our news channels. They're not doing that. They're just reporting the data in statistical form the way they've measured it.
I think this is one of the areas where I thought I wish they would have gone further, or I wish they would have sort of undifferentiated their sample of channels. So I would have liked to see a correlation matrix between number of subscribers and your propensity to report on conspiracy theories. If you're closer to the 100,000 mark, are you more likely to report on conspiracy theories? If you're closer to the 10 million mark, or whatever the top subscribed news channel is, are you less likely? So if you're an independent, but you have 5 or 6 million subscribers, are you just as unlikely to report on it as a news organization with that? So is it not whether you're news organization or independent? That's the only striation, that's the only variability. But it might just be how big are you? And if you're big, even if you're independent, you're unwilling to report on it. And if you're small, even if you're a news organization, you are willing to report on it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, or it could be the other way. Mm-hmm. You're right. That they could go deeper, and I think they did have the data. They just chose. Again, I think also these organizations, you have to be careful how you present the data. Mm-hmm. This is very bland. It's very just the numbers only, just the data, just the information. They didn't have statistics to where it implicated different types of interpretations. So the correlation matrix just says, oh, there's correlation. So therefore, there's causality. So maybe that's why they didn't do it. I don't know.
Or maybe a correlation matrix wouldn't reveal anything. The number of subscribers you have is uncorrelated to whether or not you report on conspiracy theories.
Well, maybe they did have it and they decided not to report it, but that would have been something good to do, which is another very interesting thing here. Uh, I don't remember seeing any correlations anywhere. All they have is just pie charts and bar charts and
Mm-hmm.
histograms. They really didn't, a little bit of Pareto analysis, but they didn't really go into any more depth than just reporting statistics, the bare information coming at you, and then saying, oh, this has more frequency than this. They didn't do correlations or regressions or anything else.
Mm-hmm. And they might have found some interesting things if they, or if they did. I, but I'm not knocking the Pew Research Center. I think this is valuable research. It's just, okay, this is my old adage. Let's move on. Independent
Okay.
YouTube channels are about twice as likely as news organizations to produce videos with a negative tone. Now, what they did was they'd have human coders look through the video, and they would have them take each statement and decide whether the statement was positive or negative. For a news story to qualify as positive or negative, the positive comments had to outnumber the negative ones 2-1. That's why 74% is neither positive nor negative for the news organization channels, or 69 for all, nice, 69%. For all YouTube channels, 69% is neither positive or negative. You may say that's hard to believe, but I guess it didn't reach the threshold that they had decided of double the negative comments to positive comments or double the positive comments to negative comments. That's their methodology. Now, I want to say, this is what I pulled out of this, and I might just be, but the negative for all YouTube channels is more than 5 times larger than the positive stories. For news organizations, it's more than 3 times larger. And for independent channels, it's more than 7 times larger. And I have this old adage, if they're not enraged, they're not engaged. I think a lot of the purpose of media, period, full stop, but also media on YouTube, is to present a topic and get you enraged about it. That's why negativity dwarfs the amount of positivity, because I think negativity sells. That's my takeaway from this chart.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Another takeaway that I thought of when I saw this chart is that independent channels are less constrained by network requirements.
That's true.
And news organizations might say just as negative or positive, but they'll say it in such a way that the coders may not be part of the coders' formula.
I think that's a very, very good point.
And so, but the point on the news organization channels is that the negative is more than the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your point is well taken across the board. Negativity sells. People will perk up and listen and be more inspired. Their juices get flowing. Their emotion gets going. Their blood starts flowing when something is negative. And people just, something about negativity, people get a rise out of it. But positivity, they don't, at least in news. And I'm thinking because of that premise, maybe because we have been conditioned by news, something that's like a human interest story, we wouldn't consider that news. Someone who does something dastardly, that's news.
Mm-hmm. Something to get outraged about.
Something to be outraged about. Something that's reported that is really, really nice. Well, that's kind of nice. But did you hear the news about? And then they can be outraged about something else. And I think maybe we have been conditioned over the past because of negativity, that negativity is more mainline news and defined as news as something that's positive. And it's like a human interest story, or you're not going to report on everything that someone did that was really nice.
It's true.
but you're going to report on something that someone did that was dastardly.
I think that also, this is just my back of the envelope analysis, and it may not be true at all. But if you report on someone doing something awful and it outrages you, you say, I can't believe they did that. And then you keep reading the news. If you report on a story that's positive, you say, wow, that's inspiring. I want to go out into the world and make a difference myself. And that's not what news organizations want you to do. They don't want you to go out in the world and make a difference yourself. They want you to keep your eyes glued to their content and continue to be outraged. So I think it's a feedback loop a little bit. That's just my dime store philosophy. I don't know if that's true, but
I've often thought that the reason they report negativity is there's a little bit of a self reflection, saying, wow, look what they did. I would never do that. I'm a better person than they are.
yeah, it's true.
And as somebody did something better, says, oh wow, they're better than I am. I've never done that. Oh, I feel so bad. So if you make people feel good, people will listen. If you make people feel bad or ashamed that they didn't do as good as this other person, oh my goodness, And I think that, again, we are so competitive in the United States that the negativity sells, because that just means, hey, we're better than they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be another view on it. Okay. Sorry.
They finally got into the content. Donald Trump made up the biggest chunk of news videos and were viewed by more people. That's the next chart. That's not that surprising.
No.
So if the president appeared as the topic of a video, they would get more views than if any other topic was chosen. Now, this is a fascinating breakdown of a quarter of all YouTube news focus on Trump. That's just one guy. So it sort of begs the question, what is the news? If the news is everything that's happening everywhere, and 1/4 of your coverage is on one guy, but then you look at their Pareto chart. Trump administration, congressional Democrats, public figures, 2020 Democratic candidates, government, congressional Republicans, average person, media. How much of the news is focused on, I would say, federal level U.S. politics? Congressional Democrats, congressional Republicans, 2020 Democratic candidates, most likely for president. Government, that would probably most likely be the federal government. The federal government plays an outsized role in the news compared to the role that it plays in your life. And I've always believed this. And this chart confirms that for me.
Well, let me ask you a question about this chart, David. When I see the left side, like you say, it's a Pareto chart where they had the highest frequency to the lowest frequency. And then they matched that on the right-hand side with the average number of views.
Mm-hmm.
And notice the pattern of exponentially decreasing, or the decreasing pattern, doesn't fit. It doesn't carry over. And notice the views are pretty much consistent, although average number of views is consistent from the top to the bottom. To me, it's fairly consistent.
I wouldn't say. I mean, a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate would get less than half the views of a video about the Trump administration.
But then the government is 161. Congressional Republicans is 219.
So that's
average person
30% less than a video about the Trump administration. Average person is roughly half of the views. That would, 50% is a significant drop off, right? I think the chart itself, is a little wonky in sort of showing the differences between the two. Because,
what I see on the right hand side is the what people look at
mm-hmm.
is not the same pattern as what people show.
Yeah.
The left hand side is what they show. The right hand side is what they actually look at. Like they only show the congressional Republicans only 7% of the time,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll look at it an average of 219,000 views.
Yeah. So why isn't that second? Why
So
aren't
why isn't that? Why
why
don't they
aren't
show that? Why don't they show that second?
yeah, why don't they do more videos about congressional Republicans than congressional Democrats?
So the left-hand side is what these the different sources show. The right-hand side is what the people are watching,
Mm-hmm. But
and it
maybe
doesn't. To me, it doesn't match up.
but maybe what the people are watching should not dictate what you program. What you program should be dictated by the events on the ground.
Well, it gets back to the definition of what is news.
Yes. And I think for me, news is more than just what happens in the federal government in America. And I think that people have boiled down what is news. News is what the president does and what the Congress does. And it's like, there's way more to life than that. There's way more going on in your community. There's way more going on in your state than whatever Donald Trump said that made you mad this morning, you know? And I think it's fascinating that if you look at the top channels, I think to get 100,000 subscribers and to be in their criteria of 377 channels, you are more likely or most likely to be a station or a channel, YouTube channel that reports on federal politics. So I think it's difficult to become a 100,000 subscribed channel if you're talking about whether or not they should put a traffic light at J Street and 44th Avenue, you know? If you're doing local Wheat Ridge politics, you know, do you think the mayor should apologize for his comments to the board at the city council meeting last week? You're not going to get 100,000 subscribers for that, but you can with the hype cycle of the federal government.
Well, to me, more news would be like, Amazon is making a decision to do this with this type of delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Or these supply chains are starting to create more security. So we can't have any type of cybersecurity breaches anymore. Or our water system is going to be much more secure now, and it's not going to start leaking, lime here, or leaking lead. So there's so many things that are, oh, good. And also, what is news? It's something you should know, or something that's gonna spur you to action,
Yes.
or would say bolster you as a responsible citizen. I need to know that because that puts a responsibility on me to be a good citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to what the government does it really matter? We're going to be recipients of it. It really does matter. But does it matter in the sense that there's something we have to do about it? Well, we can vote, but then is it going to change our daily lives? It could affect us significantly. It may not affect us. And if it does affect us, then fine. But the point is what is news?
Mm-hmm.
And things do we talk about that people want to listen to? Like if they're hurting and they're not paying their bills and they don't have money, do they really care what's happening in Congress unless it really helps them with their paycheck and put food on the table and feed their children?
Yeah. But I will say also, this was the month that the first, because Trump got impeached twice. The first time for offering a quid pro quo with Ukraine, and then the second time, of course, for orchestrating a potential overthrow of the government. He got found innocent both times by the Republicans in the Senate, but the first time that he got impeached for asking for dirt on his political rival from a foreign country, that's when this was made. So the main story was he's getting impeached. So that's why you see congressional Democrats, because they're going after him. So that was the story at the time. So moving on. Oh, next page. We made it to the end of the first page. Just 11 more to go. That was most of the takeaways.
Okay.
But let's see here. A quarter of U.S. adults get news from YouTube. We covered that one before. but they're equally as likely to get it for opinions, views, and social commentary as they are for information and facts. That goes back to what you're saying. What is news? And I think that knowing the facts, a lot of people would say that's the most important aspect of news. But news is also entertainment. Selling ads against your programming is the goal of a news organization as much as informing the populace. And I think having people with wild opinions, with wild views, with wild social commentary that develop a following. People like an independent YouTuber that speaks their mind, or people like Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson, that gets people to come back. They form sort of a bond or a personal relationship with the person and their specific set of ideals and commentary. And so half of all viewership is for opinions, views, and social commentary. I will also say this is a self-report. People are reporting what they get out of it. I think many of the people in this group would be unable to differentiate between information and facts and opinions, views, and social commentary.
I love you. I love that you said that, David, because I totally disagree with this percentage. I'm sure this is what they measured, but down deep, I am very, very sure that the population of the United States, everybody, mostly listens to opinions, views, social commentary, and a majority of that's going to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
Than information and facts. So much of what we hear today says, don't confuse me with the facts. This is my opinion. And that's kind of like a trend that we see in the United States and across the world, the globe, that's just human nature. They just need to believe in something. And I just don't think it's this close.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't believe that it's this close. I just think it's the left, the opinions, views, and social commentary. I think this is self-reporting. Yeah, they say, oh, I just want the information. This is okay. Well, if someone looking at them, viewing them, they'll say, no, you're there for the opinions, views, and commentary. And that's even negative commentary.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I believe.
Okay, we've already seen this graph. So, they're going over. Okay, this is interesting. On a self-report, conservative, moderate, liberal, it looks like more liberals use YouTube than conservatives, which is fascinating to me. Why do you think that is? I'll give you my opinion after you give your opinion.
Well, let me see here. Half of YouTube users, consumers, say they use is politically moderate.
Oh, they're saying, what are they seeing?
Yeah.
This isn't, how do they don't identify themselves as a conservative or a moderate or a liberal. They're saying, when you see a video, would you label it as this?
Right.
Okay, I have an opinion on this now that I know what the graph is showing.
Yeah. Again, those percentages are all pretty darn close to one another. I don't see anything that's jumping out at me.
But the liberal is twice as high as the conservative. That seems significant to me. And this is why I think that is. Because to a liberal, the news, ABC, NBC, CBS, is moderate. But to a conservative, the news, ABC, NBC, CBS, is liberal. The only thing that's moderate is conservative. That's why I think you have the numbers the way they are.
Well, that's very good. I kind of agree with that. But I guess my statistical background, because I'm a statistician, these numbers are, to me, may be significant, but they're not that big. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it was 10 to 40, yeah. But I think the sample size here is 377. That's a pretty large sample size, and I'm sure they're statistically significant.
But no, it's the 12,600 people that completed the survey.
Oh, okay.
This is the impressions of the viewers that they sampled. They gave them a survey.
Oh, this is 12,000. Oh, then that's it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm mixing up the numbers.
Because
Yeah,
the channels themselves, they did analysis on the channels, but they also had 12,600 people complete a survey. And this
I
is from
get you.
them. And once again, I mean, there's
I
no
think your point is well taken, David.
there's no way to tell like any of those individual 12,600 people what they consider moderate, liberal, or conservative. So what are you really measuring? You're measuring someone's sort of internal definitions, and for every single person, they might be different. So I'm not sure that what you get is very all that useful in the end.
I agree.
Moving on. Oh, this is interesting. Demographics. Much more male than female as far as YouTube viewership goes. And then it's comparing it to the US population. And sort of predictably, younger more than older get their news from YouTube. The demographics of education look relatively in line with the demographics of the population, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fascinatingly enough, I would say these fewer white people than the population of white people get their news from YouTube, and more Hispanics than the population of Hispanic people get their news from YouTube. How do you feel about those two statistics? Because the black is a wash, don't you think? The black is 14% are new to YouTube news consumers versus 12% of the population.
Yep, that's pretty close. But yeah, the Hispanic is more,
And
uh,
white is less?
and white is less. Interesting. Yep.
Now this is
I have no
fascinating.
I have no immediate takeaway.
Okay. Democrat or lean Democratic, Republican, lean Republican. It looks, 54 to 41. And I mean, we're talking 3 percentage points. It ends up being 6 because it's 3 on either side, but 51 to 44. It's fascinating. There are a majority of Democrat or lean Democratic in this country. So when the majority of the coverage is Democratic, is that biased? Or is it just a reflection of the population? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah.
It's like you need to give equal time to Republicans. It's like, but they're only 44% of the population. Maybe you should give 44% of the time to them. I don't know how much water that argument holds, but
Or equal time to the paramilitary people who are trying to overthrow the government.
yeah.
And they have an outcry, like you're trying to censor us.
Okay, this is user behavior, and it's self-reported user behavior. I think it would be fascinating if the survey respondents gave Pew Research access to their accounts. And they could actually get, instead of self-reporting, they could get hard data on how they access this stuff. But that's just me. I know how robust YouTube's analytics are. Okay. Fewer than half of YouTube news consumers say they are loyal to a few shows, people, or channels. And a similar share say they pay a lot of attention to who created the videos they watch on YouTube. I don't have an immediate takeaway from that. I'm just sort of surprised. I thought that YouTube was sort of a loyalty thing, but I guess it's not necessarily.
Well, there again, I'm sure the statistics, the data bears these percentages out.
Yeah.
But again, I kind of disagree with him because I think, again, the way YouTube does it, they'll feed you videos that you're interested in. Then they're going to show you something you're not interested in.
Yes.
And so it appears to you that, you'll whatever comes up, you'll watch whatever, that's fine. But then whatever comes up, they feed you what you're likely to want to watch.
Mm-hmm. And that gets into our next one. Most YouTube news consumers occasionally watch the news videos recommended by the site's algorithm. Yes, on occasion, 67%. Yes, regularly, 11%. No, they don't watch the algorithmically recommended ones. And they say the recommendations are at least somewhat good. Very good, somewhat bad. Now, I think that people also are unable to tell when they're being algorithmically recommended a video. So on the sidebar of YouTube, let's just open up a YouTube.
Oh, and we'll see what you watch at
This is
what comes
the
up.
Sons of Sequoia. So there we are live. We have some of
Okay.
the stuff we've been reporting on. But
Yeah.
what if we just looked up Fox News? Fox News. Okay, now we have Ted Cruz from 5 hours ago on Fox News. I click on this. And let me just get rid of ourselves in the shot real quick so we can see that all of this is algorithmically suggested. Okay.
Boom, 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 boom. There they are.
Fox News,
Yep.
Fox News, Forbes breaking news. Okay, so it's not all Fox News. Fox News, Fox News, Fox News, Fox News. I think that people are unable to, they don't realize that this is all algorithmically served to you. So I think some of these people that are saying, yes, on occasion, I'll look, don't realize that everything that appears in front of their face.
Hold on, David. The third one down. Go back to the top.
Okay.
That one there. Forbes breaking news. I say, okay, well, that's something different. That's something different. Probably not. It's probably along the same topics that all those others in Fox News are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably the data that support, and also that's is that the whatever the article, whatever they're talking about there, it's probably talking about the issues that Fox News is talking about.
Yes.
That's all I want to say.
So yeah, I mean,
so yeah, it is. That's where the percentages come in.
But
Somewhat. Sometimes I look at something different. But when you look at something different, it's what's being fed to you.
But I think that people may just think autoplay. Whatever autoplays next, that's what the algorithm's choosing. But this is what I get to choose right here on the right-hand column of YouTube. But really, the algorithm is choosing those videos for you as well. I don't think that you're going to search something in this bar, then when the video's over, stop, come back and search something in the bar again, and find a completely different video. I think that a lot of people use this when they're watching the news to get the headlines, and it's algorithmically served to you to sort of, I think there's a Bayesian approach that's like, it converges on what your exact preferences are, and it's telling you exactly what you want to hear. That's how all social media works, right?
Right. And if you, instead of Fox News, if you hit CNN News, you'll have a different sidebar.
Yes, so let's try that. Of course, now my search history is tainted by the fact that I just searched Fox News, so that plays into the algorithm of what they decide to serve me. CNN News, though, and now we have Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Fox News, Forbes, Seth Meyers, Forbes, CNN. So now, since I searched Fox News and then I searched CNN, it's taking into account the fact that I searched for Fox News and adding that into my algorithmic search. Now, when we get back to the study, I don't think people are that sophisticated. I don't think they really know what's going on. So if you ask them to self-report, they have no idea what they're talking about. Maybe they do, maybe.
Well, you mentioned Bayesian. So you go to Fox News, and all of a sudden they're all Fox News. You go to CNN, and there's Fox News, CNN.
Mm-hmm.
But if you did CNN 10 times, then you might get one, maybe no Fox News then.
That's true.
Because you're going to be converging. It doesn't just go to one place to the other. It converges to what the mainstream is. And the mainstream is what you're clicking on and what you're interested in and what the viewer chooses. What the viewer chooses is what you focus in on in a Bayesian manner.
Yes, I think that's true. So every result plays into
because the algorithm maximizes the either the clicks or the view time, or they have different metrics.
Mm-hmm.
They want to maximize that. And the way to maximize that is keep feeding them something that they're interested in. And people are interested in different things, so we don't know what people are interested in. All we know is what the clicks are
Mm-hmm.
and what they choose to do. And then the more those sidebars are being clicked, then that goes into more they're going to give you the same stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I've explained it in more detail, but uh, people don't understand that.
I don't think they do, and I think that they're like, on occasion I'll let it autoplay to the next one, but most of the time I pick my video from the right-hand side. It's like, that's the algorithm telling you what to pick, you know? It's the illusion of choice. That's because you do get to choose which video, but the videos you get to choose from are selected by the algorithm. And I'm not sure that people understand that. What do you call this type of graph?
Let's see, news consumers who rely heavily on the site for news, more likely go there for facts than opinions. Oh, wow, what's going on here? Yeah, I thought I read this, but I don't remember this graph.
This was a different section that we didn't cover.
Oh, okay.
This is too confusing for me. I say it's not even worth figuring out. Let's move on. News videos are helpful and largely accurate according to those who get their news there. Are largely accurate, 73%. Help them better understand current events, 66%. Now, I think the algorithmic aspect of sort of feeding you something in line with your preferences causes these numbers to be what they are, right?
Mm-hmm. Again, yeah.
I would say that this is true. YouTube news consumers say access to sources outside the mainstream commentary make YouTube news unique. So that's kind of true, but also the access to the mainstream outlets as well. So to have them all in one place, I think that's what makes it unique.
Mm-hmm.
If you subscribe to whatever, timpool.com, Timcast, that's all you're getting. But on YouTube, you can get Timcast and David Pacman next to each other. Most YouTube consumers do not see major problems with getting news from the site. Okay. I mean, that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Partisan differences on whether censorship, misinformation, or harassment are very big problems with YouTube. So censorship by YouTube is the biggest problem according to Republicans. Limiting ad revenue for video creators, that's a wash. Political bias is a bigger problem for Republicans than Democrats. Misinformation is a much bigger problem for Democrats than Republicans. And harassment is a bigger problem for Democrats than Republicans. I think this is what you would expect, but I'm glad that they did the work and sort of teased this out of the data.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. This is pretty much what you would expect.
So does this mean, do you think, of course, the numbers are very close, but because censorship is the biggest issue, do Republicans care more about censorship by big media platforms than Democrats do about misinformation on big media platforms? Since this number is higher than this number. The 38 is higher than the 34.
My feeling is no. That's not what that means. It's relative. It's relative. The censorship by YouTube at the top, the 38% for Republicans and the 22% for Democrats, that's just relative to that one topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think I don't think you can go between topics. I think the relative difference within a topic is much more important than between topics. It's important between topics, but not as much.
Yeah. So
No.
the two biggest differences are censorship, that's a Republican issue, and then misinformation, which is a Democrat issue.
Right.
Right?
And so for the Republican issue, it goes from 22 to 38. For the Democratic issue, it goes from 24 to 34.
Yes.
So it's 10% difference, where the other is what, 16%.
16, yeah.
Yeah. I don't see that as a significant finding. But what is significant is the topics. I think the topics are the important thing. Censorship by Republicans, because they want to say what they want to say.
Mm-hmm.
Misinformation by Democrats, saying people are saying things that are wrong.
Yes.
And that's pretty interesting if you just frame it that way. Well, I want to say what I want to say, and the other side says, I don't like people saying things that are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Let's fact check what you say. No, don't fact what I say. Don't confuse me with the facts. I want to say what I want to say.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that it's not censorship, because YouTube's a private platform. And misinformation is not against, specifically is not against YouTube's terms of service. If you're doing it as satire or parody, or, you can provide misinformation on YouTube. Now, they do have explicit terms of service that if you violate, they'll take down your channel. But that's not censorship. That's breach of contract on the part of the creator. That's how I see it anyway.
It's against the rules.
Yes.
It's like you're going to a grocery store and you say, I'm hungry, so I want to take this candy bar and I want to eat it, but I don't want to pay for it. It says, you can't do that. Oh, you're denying me the ability to eat something. It says, yes, because you have to pay for it. It's against the law. It's against the rules. They say, no, you're denying me my rights to eat. And they say, no, you're violating the rules here.
Yeah.
And so one is like, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. That's not the same thing. It's apples and oranges that they're going back and forth.
Yes.
Again, it's the negativity.
I have a more childish example. It's like you go into a grocery. It's like you go into a grocery store.
Uh-huh.
And you go to one of the checkout aisles and you jump up on the conveyor belt and you take a dump right on the conveyor belt. All of a sudden, next thing you know, you're getting kicked out, and you say, "Well, I thought this was America. I thought I had free speech. I thought I had that's just my free speech. Why am I being censored by Kroger? Why is Kroger censoring me?" And it's like, because you can't take a dump on the conveyor belt. Like, it's the same thing with YouTube. You can't come into their store and take a dump on the conveyor belt and expect not to get kicked out. It's common courtesy, right?
Well, they have rules.
Yeah, there's rules.
They have rules, and they let people say what they want to say, as long as you don't violate their rules. It's their channel, for crying out loud.
Yeah, they're the ones that are hosting your videos. They're providing the infrastructure for our podcast and for your videos. So if they chose to take this down because we violated their rules, we don't really have much say in the matter, right?
That's right.
If we violate YouTube's rules and they chose to take this down, we probably shouldn't have violated their rules. I know that people depend on YouTube for mass communication, but you have to understand that YouTube is its own entity and they can operate the way they want. And you're really taking advantage of a lot of services that they provide when you broadcast on YouTube, like we do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m.
Yeah, but it's like going into a store and saying, I want to do this. No, it's against the rules. Well, no, I want to do it anyway. You should not prevent me from doing it. Mm-hmm. It's like coming into your home and saying, this is what you need to do for me. It says, no, get out of my home. Oh, you're censoring me. It says, this is my home.
Mm-hmm.
It says, you can't come in here and tell me what to do. Get out. And so we do have rules. Okay. And, well, what we're saying, this is a different subject, but anyway, I don't want to go there with rules.
Okay.
But the point I see that is here. One is misinformation, the other is censorship.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on where you sit.
Yeah. The thing is this blue misinformation the same as this red line? I kind of feel like there's a lot of overlap there, right?
What do you mean overlap? What do you mean?
The misinformation that Democrats are concerned about turns into the censorship that Republicans are concerned about.
Oh, yeah,
It's the same thing.
yeah. I mean, we've seen that the last for many many years on YouTube, where someone challenges you with the facts, and they go, I don't want to. This is
You can't
uh,
do that.
and you can't do that. Can't do that. What I say is what you have to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Because no, yeah. Anyway,
YouTube consumers are equally likely to often get sites from news outlets and independent channels.
this is interesting. I like this a lot. That what is news? It's what someone else said about the news.
Uh-huh.
Oh, geez. Like there was another graphic too where it had all these percentages.
That's in part 2. That's in the next page.
Okay. But the thing of it is that, yeah, we're talking about that. Like, well, if the YouTube news consumers often get their news from other news outlets, then where does the news originate?
Yeah, that's in the next page where the media is the number one source.
Oh, okay.
Before we move to the next page, should we just go long today? We're already long.
We're already there.
Okay. This is the topics that were covered in the month that they studied the news. It's fascinating. I mean, I could explain it to you, but you'd have to look at the chart to get an idea of.
It's a bar chart, and there's a bunch of different topics, and the frequencies, the percentages are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to
The
2.
next page.
This is what we were going to do. We were just going to do this today.
Okay.
Now we're an hour and 15 minutes in.
Yeah, this is what I read.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is Galen Stocking, Patrick Van Kessel, Michael Barthel, Katarina Eva Matza, and Maya Kuzam's research. A closer look at the channels producing news on YouTube and the videos themselves. Now it goes a little bit more into the methodology, which we've already covered. Okay, we've seen this already, the 42-49-9. That's 42% watch independent channels, 49% are news organizations, and 9% are other organizations. More than 4 in 10 YouTube news channels are oriented around a specific personality. Now, I would argue that a lot of non-personality driven channels are driven by personalities. There's just more than one. So Fox News is driven by Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity. MSNBC may be driven by Lawrence O'Donnell and Rachel Maddow. CNN may be driven by Ari Melber and Chris Cuomo. Or maybe not for long with Chris Cuomo. But there's multiple personalities. So I do feel like they're personality driven, just not singular personality driven, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does to me.
And we've already talked about that a little bit.
I think you're right.
Oh, this is interesting. An overwhelming majority of YouTube news channels do not describe themselves in ideological terms.
Yeah.
So 4% describe themselves as left-leaning, 8% describe themselves as right-leaning. News organization channels are 4% and 4%, that they explicitly describe themselves as having an ideological bent. This is the interesting thing. In the other organizations, so if we go back to this earlier pie chart, 9% of the top 377 channels were other organizations. 49% were news organizations and 42% were independent. If we go back to look at the other organizations, 14% of those describe themselves as right-leaning, 0% describe themselves as left-leaning. That's fascinating, don't you think?
Yep.
Yes. So more channels are likely to explicitly describe themselves as right-leaning. But I think that the news organization channels, and this is sort of plays into what you were saying about the positive and negative stories, the news organization channels had very few explicitly or less than independent channels, explicitly positive or negative stories. And I think that's, you don't explicitly say, we're Fox Republican News. And you don't say, we're MS Democrat News, MSNBC Democratic News. You don't say those things if you are a news organization, but the proof is in the pudding, and most of your analysis and opinion lean in one direction. But you don't say it because you're a news organization, right?
Yeah. Well, going back to that other graph of censorship versus misinformation,
Mm-hmm.
with the right leaning and left leaning, if you start putting those two together, if you can say whatever you want to say, whether it's fact checked or not, you're going to be right leaning. If you want to fact check things, you'll be left leaning. And so I don't know if that's true or not. But my point is, the statistics really lead you to a lot of conclusions, a lot of relationships that raise questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a very interesting right-left question, very interesting question. And the statistics again, are just small percentages, but they are pretty significant. 0 to 14%, 4% to 13% for independent channels. We're 4% left-leaning, 13% right-leaning. Most of them are right-leaning.
Yes. The ones that specifically describe themselves as conservative, Republican, or pro-Trump. And only 4% explicitly describe themselves as liberal, progressive, or democratic. Fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
4
it's
in 10.
It's a popularity contest.
4 in 10 YouTube news channels ask their viewers for donations. That's either through Patreon, YouTube membership, cryptocurrency, or PayPal. Maybe we should start a Sons of Sequoia PayPal and say, hey, if you're listening to this, give us some money. Wouldn't be that hard to set up. So yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Independent creators, they get money directly from their audience. Mm-hmm. I think that's the next chart. See, only 14% of news organizations solicit donations. 71% of independent channels solicit donations. Now, I think that the independents, though, so the news organization, their revenue model is B2B. Like, CNN, MSNBC, we'll sell ads against our content. And so our revenue comes from a business, and then we'll give that content to consumers for free because the money comes on the ads we sell against it. Whereas independent channels, of course, if you have over 100,000 subscribers, you're running ads on your YouTube videos. But independent channels will ask their viewers for donations. And I think the result of that is there's more of a personal connection to your independent news source because you've given them money. You sort of become bought in. It's fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm. Or you send them money because you're bought into the news that you're given.
Okay, the table. Nearly all news channels reach their audiences on multiple platforms. I found this one fascinating. So
I didn't understand this table.
So news organizations, they're on all the social medias. Independent channels, they're on most of the social medias. Now, news organizations 96% of them have a website. The fascinating thing is that if you're an independent, only 41% of independent channels have a website. So you could have a YouTube channel with 100,000 followers. You have a Facebook, you have an Instagram, you have a Snapchat, you have a Twitter, you have a LinkedIn, but you don't have your own website. So a lot of independent creators don't see the value in creating their own website. Now, this is fascinating. News organization channels and independent channels, they have podcasts at 13%. That's kind of interesting, don't you think? 13%. It's fascinating that's another. And then, of course, news organization channels are the only ones that would have developed a mobile app.
Mobile app because they have the ability. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It just shows. Yeah.
So I think that if you're an independent creator, you're everywhere, but I think a lot of them don't want to maintain a website themselves. So they'll just allow the social media platforms to be their voice, where they can be found. Okay, about a third of the most viewed YouTube news videos from December 2019 were about Trump's impeachment. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could get into this, but it's too much information to sort of talk about. Um, Independent channels covered QAnon conspiracy theories much more frequently than news organizations did. We've talked about this already. This is a sort of a repeat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, a quarter of all videos studied focused on President Trump. That's a lot.
That was back in 2020. That
Yeah,
would be the same graph today.
no, December of 2019. But still, the news organizations, 1/4 of their content was about one guy. That's pretty insane to me. Because there's more than one person in the world. Here's the negative positive chart again. We've already seen this, so we can sort of glaze over it. Here's what you were talking about. The types of sources cited in YouTube news. So the number one source that's cited in YouTube news is the media. And I was explaining this last night. It's like if the Washington Post gets a scoop, all of the news channels will report on the Washington Post reporting. So their source for the scoop is the media. Now, I think it's fascinating. News organizations, they'll talk to a prominent Republican, prominent Democrat, other government officials, expert, social media, average person. They'll do a poll, they'll talk to a public figure or other, and that's the Pareto analysis. It goes down. I think it's fascinating that independent channels and news organizations rely on other media's reporting to get their sources. So they're not really doing their own reporting. They're reporting on reporting. And that's more than half of what you see, right?
Yes, it is. And to me, this contrasts with what we talked about on Wednesday with Channel 5 and with Andrew Callahan,
Mm-hmm.
that he didn't get it from other channels. He went to the actual source
Yes.
and he let the source talk. And then you heard exactly what they were saying. So that news, and he probably wouldn't even be classified as a news channel.
Because not all of his videos are news.
No.
They would say, oh, the pickup artist convention he went to, that's not news. So he's less than 50% of his content is news or whatever, you know? And I think that he's a great journalist.
But then my question is, why isn't that news? That's information.
I think it's just they're trying to examine a phenomenon. And that phenomenon is news on YouTube. They have to codify it somehow. And the way that they put guardrails on what is news excludes him, even though he might be the most real newsman.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. How can you say that what he does is not news? Because that's something that he's giving information about something that's actually happening, about the world. And a news is only news if you report things that you choose that's popular.
Yes. And we've reached the end of the findings.
Yeah.
So do you have any wrap up?
Yeah, it's time to, I guess we could, how long have we been here, David? An hour and a half?
Hour and a half, yeah.
You know what I think?
What?
I think if we went to page 3, we can go another hour and a half.
Probably.
Because when we start talking, it's just we go back and forth, and it raises more questions than answers.
And there's a lot. I mean, shout out to the Pew Research Foundation, or whatever it's called, Pew Research Center, and the authors of this report: Stocking, Van Kessel, Barthel, Ava Matza, and Kuzam. They did rigorous work. Now, the funny thing is, when someone publishes rigorous work, you wish they would have done more work. Or you wish they would have done their work slightly differently. Now, they did what they did, and I'm glad that this exists in the world. I'm glad that this information is out there. Some of it is very expected. Some of it is somewhat expected, just according to my own personal biases. But I think that the rigor with which they undertook this endeavor, I think, is a noble endeavor. Now, what you learn is not earth-shattering. It's not groundbreaking, but I'm glad that it exists, that someone's done this work.
Actually, I might shout out positive. I have a positive statement with Pew, this research, because what they did was fine, was good. Anything, when you start doing these kinds of studies and analysis and reporting and statistics, there's always going to be something you can complain and criticize and review and identify that could be done better. But I think you should also recognize what they did do. And I appreciate what they did. I think what they did was a good job. And I think that this kind of stuff should be done more. And what they're doing is a service.
Yes.
So I think it's fine. I think it's fine. There's no way that you can do a perfect job when you start working with statistics.
Yes. And I think that it's useful. I could be more useful, but it's useful. And it's like everything else in the world. It's like, why didn't you focus on the things that I want you to focus on? It's like, because they were focusing on what they focused on. So, I mean, kudos to them. I think that I'll leave it at that and start wrapping up. I'm going to play the outro music and say that this has been the Sons of Sequoia podcast. We're available on YouTube Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is David Harper. My co-host has been my father, Michael Harper. Do you have anything to say before we sign off?
Sons of Sequoia says, keep on talking, but listen more than you talk and try to understand what the other person is saying. Goodbye.